We begin the current Daf Mesechtes Kidushin Daf Mem Dalid. We begin 2 lines up from the bottom of the Yom and Daf Mem Gimel Beis, where the Gemara is in the middle of a very detailed discussion from the previous Daf, where the Gemara introduced a topic where it's going to relate back to the halacha of our Mishnah of the Ish Mekadesh Esbita, as we're going to see later on in the Gemara. The Gemara had introduced a machlekes in Mesechtes Gittin regarding a naira hamayrasa, which we're going to shortly explain, regarding where she's a naira, so she's between 12 and 12 and a half, which is a very unique status that the girl has, because on the one hand, she's an adult, she's over bas mitzvah, over 12 years old, but on the other hand, she's still a naira. The uniqueness of that is that until she becomes 12 and a half as a begera, she's still in her father's domain. And she's engaged, which engaged is also not totally removed from her father's domain until she gets nisuin, which is married. So the Tanakama said in Masechtes Gittin that her and her father could receive her get. They both have rights. She's an adult. Her father still has rights in her. They can both receive her get from her husband if she was only engaged. Yudah says, no, you can't have two hands meriting in the same thing. Rather, her father receives the get and not the girl. Now, we had a machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish in that machlekes of Masechtes Gittin. Rish Lakish said, just like we have machlekes regarding gerushin, so too machlekes regarding Kidushin, that they're both going to have this machlekes regarding could this naira receive Kidushin, or do we say that only the father receives the Kidushin? Yechon says no, machlekes is only by gerushin, but for Kidushin, everyone agrees it's only the father and not her. And the Gemara had brought from Rabbi Yisrael Chanina, what's the reason Yechanan according to the Rabbanan? Why is it that they hold that both of them could do it by gerushin, but only the father could do it for Kidushin? Oh, so on that the Gemara said, gerushin, where she's bringing herself back to her father's domain, she's no more going to be with this husband that she was engaged to. Okay, then it's bein hi bein avia. But Kidushin, which is removing her from her father's domain, so then it could only be the father who can activate that, but not her. That's where we left off from the Gemara. And the Gemara is going to continue to ask on these opinions of Yechon and Shlakish that they are holding regarding this machlekes of qualifying the machlekes regarding gerushin as it applies to Kidushin. Shiur corresponds with Kalzich and Cheskel. Turn to Daf Chaim. Bishop turn to today's Daf. Some of this discussed in today's Daf are with a naira hamayrasa, like we explained, the girl that's a teen, a tween, whatever she is, but if she's between 12 and 12 and a half that's engaged, can she accept her own get or not? That's the machlekes and Masechtes Gittin. And also, regarding Kidushin, that's machlekes Amayram in that machlekes Tanoim of Masechtes Gittin. Two explanations in the distinction between Kidushin and get, which we just mentioned one of them. The Gemara will bring another one of them. The halacha of a nara who awaits yibum, that we'll see might be different than everything else, can accept mimer from the yavam. So even though we're going to say that possibly a naira cannot accept Kidushin, but Yibum, that she will be able to accept Maimer. Maimer is the rabbinic Kidushin that the Yavam does to the Yavama. Some of the other terms and concepts in today's Daf are the Naira. On Amid Beis, they want to discuss Marsha Ta'asa Shliach Lekabagita Miyad Baila. What's the halacha? Could she make an agent to receive a get from her husband, even according to those who hold that the Naira could receive the get, the Kidushin? Does that mean she herself could make a shliach also or not? The halacha of a katana, a minor, where a minor, according to everyone, she doesn't have her own yad, her own intelligence. What happens if she gets engaged without her father knowing? This 10-year-old girl, if she's in the mall and she gets engaged. So the halacha is tzricha get, what tzricha mean, as we'll explain, which they seem to be contradictory, because get means to say that you were engaged, and miyun means that you were not, you only did it as a minor. As we'll see, the Gemara will explain why would you require both. And the distinction towards the end of the daf of whether shidchu, they're already engaged, which really our engagement that we have currently these days is really shiduchim. It's shidchu, it's not a halachic kedushin that we do by the chuppah. We do both kedushin and nisuin. But in Talmudic times they had shidchu, they were engaged. And the distinction between that or loy shidchu, if they weren't even engaged and they had no relationship at all, regarding this previous halacha of tzricha ged v'tzricha miyun. So begin the current daf on daf mem gimel amud beis, 2 lines up and about in the Yomim. As we had mentioned, that there is this machlekes in Mesechtes Gittin regarding naira rasa. the Rabbanan hold hivavi makabeli as gita. So if a girl between 12 and 12 and a half years old who underwent erisin, she can accept her own get, because she's an adult. Additionally, her father can also accept her get because yadi seirasa zachal rachmana. Her father's ability to accept the get was given in addition to her own. That the Torah says he has rights, that doesn't take away her rights. Yehuda, as we quoted from the Mishnah Masechet holds no two people cannot both have the power to affect one person's divorce. Only the father can accept her get because during the Yomei Naris, the Torah placed her completely in her father's domain until she married. Therefore, as long as her father is alive, she cannot accept her own get. That's Machlekes Masechtas Gittin we quoted in the previous stuff. Then we quote already Machlekes Amayram. Rabbi Yechonah holds Machlekes the Gerushin. Machlekes only regarding divorce. Regarding Kidushin, even the Rabban hold, a Naira cannot accept her own Kidushin. Shlakish disagrees. Says no, Kamachlekes the Gerushin, Kach Machlekes the Kidushin. Yehuda holds that a Naira cannot accept her own Kidushin. Rabban hold that no, a Naira can accept her own Kidushin. That was the Machlekes Rabbi Yechonah and Shlakish. Now, there's two versions of Rabbi Yossi B'Chanina's explanation of my time with Rabbi Yechonah the Rabban, which is the last thing we left off with in the previous daf, that Gerushin Hivavi Mekabel Gita, that they hold both could do it. But by Kedushin, Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabban agree that no, Avi Mekabel Kedushin V'lahi. Only the father could do it and not her. What would be the difference between Gerushin and Kedushin? So what we had just left off with was that by Gerushin, the reason why both her and her father could do it is because the Machneses Atzma L'Shos Aviyah. Through the get, she's now returns to his jurisdiction. He's okay with that. So go ahead, go receive your get, because anyways, you're coming back to me. That is when it's going to work. But Kedushin, no, only the father could accept it, not her, because the Mafkas Atzma L'Shos Aviyah. Her father does not consent because she's now leaving his jurisdiction, so you don't have the right. It's only if I accept the Kedushin that you're going to leave. That was the point we left off with. Now this is where we begin the Gemara. The Gemara has a question on that premise. Really? Is that the difference between Gittin and Kidushin? Bahari Maimer are the Kidushin of a Yavam by the Yavama when his brother died without any children. That's called Maimer. That halacha is the Mafkas Atzma Meshus Aviyah. If she's going to do Maimer with the Yavam, that's essentially a rabbinic Kidushin. That's removing her from her father's domain. Meaning her chassan died without any children. If she's going to do Maimer, she's going to be leaving. If she's not going to do Maimer, she's going to be still be in her father's domain. And yet, Tanan, which actually a brisa that we learned is a Getin Amid Aleph that says, Kitana, a minor that's a Shemeres Yavam. She was a 10-year-old girl that was waiting for Yibum min ha'eresin. It was very important. She was only engaged to her 15-year-old chassan. She was 10 years old. And he died without any children. Now, they were only engaged, which is important because as long as a girl's only engaged, she's still in her father's domain, as long as she doesn't have nisuin. They didn't have marriage. Once she gets married, the father has no rights anymore. She's not in his domain, out of the domain. She has nothing to do with him anymore. So she was widowed from Eresin. Says the Brisa, in Oisim Maimer, the Chassan, the Yavam, her Chassan's brother, cannot do Maimer Il Medas Aviyah, only with the father's consent, with the father's awareness.
Could she get engaged without the father?
No, she's a Ketana. Here we're talking about specifically regarding Yibum, but the Ketana cannot do it without the father's consent. She doesn't have any of her own consciousness. Now, the Hanaira, this is the main point we want to ask from. The Naira, the girl between 12 and 12 and a half, says the Brisa, Bei Medas Atzma, Bei Medas Aviyah. Not only with her father's awareness, even if it's just with her awareness, and we're not going to quote yet the words Masha Enki B'Kedushin, although it's here, we're going to say it later, but one thing we see is that even where she's removing herself from her father's domain, which is what a Maimer does when you're a Naira that was only engaged, still the Rabbanan hold of their opinion that it could be Midas Atzma. This contradicts the premise of the answer we gave before. Rabbi Yochanan wanted to say, according to Rabbanan, that this that they hold Bei Midas Aviyah, Bei Midas Atzma only works by Gerushin. Why? Because it's bringing you back to me, says Tati. Okay, I let you do it. But with Kedushin, which is removing you from me, then it's only me. I'm not letting you go ahead and do it. But what are you going to say about Maimer? Maimer is removing her from him. It's a Kedushin to the Yavam, and yet you see the Rabbanan hold. It works. Beimendas Atzma, Beimendas Aviyah. with the first. What does it have to do with this guy? If she doesn't do Maimer, but that means he's saying in general that there is such a concept, but does that mean that in general you're always going to say that he's going to let? But that was one time. What does that have to do with now? Now, anytime she wants to remove herself, the first time was also him, right? By Kidushin, right? So now it's also still me. When you want to leave, you need my permission. Coming back is you don't need my permission. So says the Gemara, Eliyidma, you're right. We have to revise this statement. If we said it's Hachitma, this is the way we have to say it. He says a different approach. He says, "My tam Rabbi Yechanan Rabbanan." What's the reason according to Rabbi Yechanan in the Rabbanan? Remember, Rabbi Yechanan is the one who holds that there's the difference between קידושין and Kedushin. Why is it by קידושין she could do it, by Kedushin not? A different reason. Kidushin de medaita. Kedushin. What is the interesting difference between Gittin and Kedushin is that by you and you do Kedushin, the recipient needs to have consent. You can't forcibly get a woman engaged. Oh, that's a v'yavlahi. That's the father, not her, because the Torah gave the father the rights in his daughter. She doesn't get to make. She's not the board of herself. The board members of herself is the father. He gets to decide. Yeah, but that's by Kedushin when we need consent. קידושין the balkarcha, by divorce, it's forcible. So beini bein aviyas, it doesn't make a difference if it's her or her father. Who cares for his consent, for his awareness? When he accepts it, it's also forcible. So it doesn't make a difference to us if it's him or her, and therefore that's a different interpretation of Rabbi Yisrael Chanina in Rabbi Yechanan according to Rabbanan. What's the difference between Gittin and Kidushin? The Rabbanan hold by Kidushin, it could only be the father because we need consent. And guess who gets to give consent? It's the father. By Gerushin, we have a mission Masechtas Gittin that they say bein hi bein aviyah. Yeah, because who cares? Anyways, it has nothing to do with your consent.
The father has to support the daughter again, and it's enough.
That he has to support her.
Support his daughter again.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but the get, who receives it, doesn't make a difference. You have no say in the matter anyway. It's balkarchach anyway. The husband gets the divorce according to the biblical halacha based on his consent, nothing to do with the recipients. And therefore, it doesn't make a difference between her and her father. It says the Gemara, Harei Maimer. The difficulty here again is, what do you do with Maimer? Maimer is a Kedushin. Demidaita. You need her consent because it's Kedushin, right? If the Yavam wants to do Maimer with her, he's got to go ahead and say, hey, do you want this? And yet, we learned Ben Hi Ben Aviyah. That also contradicts, again, the same premise that you tried to say. Now, the revised version is also difficult with that. What's the difference between Maimer and Kedushin? Why are you saying by Kedushin that she has no say, but yet by Maimer she does? Says the Gemara, Hasam b'Maimer de Balkarcha. Oh, there it's talking about when it's the Maimer that's forcible because of a Rebbe. Even though Maimer is a Kedushin, it's going like Rebbe that he says that Maimer takes effect by the Yavama Balkarcha. If he throws her money and he says Hared Mekadeshasli, it's going to work. The time like we learn the Brisa that it's a machlekes, and we're going like Rebbe. If someone gives a Maimer, gives Kidushin, gives money to his Yavama, his brother, his late brother's widow, that's Shalom Medaita without her consent. Rebbe Emakane says it's going to require like other Maimer to require a get if for this Maimer, if he comes to do Chalitza, which you have to undo now, this rabbinic Kidushin of Maimer, you would require a get for that Maimer. It's going to require, even though he's doing a Balkarcha. The Chacham say, no, you're right. It's like a Kedushin. A Kedushin, you can't be forced. But we're going like Rebbe, and therefore that's a difference between Maimer and Kedushin. Says Gemara, wait a second, my time to Rebbe. What's the reason of Rebbe? Why does it work? Isn't it a Kedushin? How could a Kedushin work against a woman's consent? How could it work forcible? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Gomer mibiya di Yavama. We learn out the Maimer by Yavama from the Bia of Yavama. Ma biya di Yavama balkarcha. Just like we see that when he wants to consummate this relationship with the sister-in-law of his, with his late brother's wife, he could do it forcible. As the Gemara learns out in Yevamos Daf Chesam Beis, from V'yibma he could do Balkarcha. There's nothing to do with your choice. Hashem gave me you as a wife, and he could do the Bia Balkarcha, and therefore create this relationship. Here also, regarding the Maimer, the rabbinic marriage could also be done Balkarcha. But Rabban Sabbath, they say, no, Yafin Mekidushin. Instead of learning out from Bia Divama, learning out from Kidushin, because this is a rabbinic Kidushin. So Ma Kidushin, the Medaita, just like a Kidushin, obviously, if you have a woman to get her married, you need her consent. Af Hachanami, the Medaita, here also the Maimer has to be with her consent. So he must say, what is the principle that they're disagreeing about? Rebbe Sabi holds Mili di Yavama. When you're learning out the halachas of a Yavama, have a little made of. Learn it from the other halachas of Yibum, which is from the Bia of the Yibum, which is just like with the Balkarcha, so the Maimer. Rabban Sabi, they hold no, the context is different. Kedushin and Kedushin have a little made of. Which the question is, what's the primary characteristic? We're learning that there's a Kedushin. We're learning from the other halachas of a Kedushin. Just like a regular Kedushin needs Medaita, he also needs Medaita. But Al Kaponim, that's what have a little male of. Therefore, that's where that answers the difference between Maimer and Kedushin, because of the fact that Maimer could be Balkarcha. So therefore, in a sense, it's really like Gerushin, which could also be done Balkarcha. And that was actually the principle that in the second version of Rabbi Shloimy that he explained to say, oh, that's the reason why Birchan holds, according to Rabban, there's a difference between Gerushin and Kedushin, that by Gerushin you don't need the father's das, it could even be her. And therefore that's the same thing by Maimer. Whereas by Kedushin, where you need das, then guess who? The father has to give consent, because he's the one that controls. And the Gemara says, it's also logical that this that we said by Maimer, that Bein Hi, Bein Aviyah, is talking because we're going like Rebbe, that it's Maimer al Karcha, but you're right, but other Kedushin, of course, it would be only the father, not her. Because Mataritz Rabbi Yechanan, meaning the way we're explaining for Rabbi Yechanan, the logic would tell us B'diktani Seifa. In that Seifa of that Brisa, which said this halacha of Hanaira, the girl that's between 12 and 12 and a half, that we said Bein Medasa be Bein Medasa Asma, that's going to work. It ends off, which before we quote in parentheses, which Marshal takes out because it wasn't relevant for the Gemara over there, says Masha Enke Kedushin. Oh, whereas it's not the case by Kedushin, meaning that there it's only going to be the father, not herself. Why? Because there it's not done Balkarcha. So it's logical, like we're explaining, that the reason why Maimer is different is because there it could be done Balkarcha, which is like Rebbe, and therefore by Kedushin, which cannot be done Balkarcha, therefore it has to be only her father and not her. But then says, wait a second, based on everything that we're saying, then we should refute Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish had held, as we quoted from the previous Daf, that according to the Rabbanan, there's no difference between Gerushin and Kedushin. Just like they hold by Gerushin, the Naira Hamarasa could go ahead and get her get. So too by Kedushin, the Naira could get her Kedushin. What do you mean? You see clearly the Bryce is differentiating between get and between Kedushin. That we say that the Bryce says clearly that by Kedushin, that's only going to be Midas Aviyah. We said Maimer is Bein Midas Asma, Bein Midas Aviyah. But Kedushin, Masha Enke Kedushin, that she cannot. What do you mean? That I thought the Rabban hold, there's no difference between Gerushin and Kedushin. She would tell you, it's not difficult, man. You know, the time of the Bryce says Rabbi Hudi. Go like Rabbi Huda. The minute he says, that you cannot have both father and daughter having the same rights in the same person. And therefore, that's why, of course, Kedushin is going to be only the father, because it's Rabbi Huda who holds even the same thing by Gerushin. And it's not a contradiction on Rish Lakish in the opinion of the Rabbanan, because it's not going like the Rabbanan.
What's the concept there that they both? Why? It's a partnership, or it's who cares?
Yeah, it's a question about exactly the Gemara discusses getting more like, are we adding on the father that she's an adult and then the father also has the rights, or we say that no, that there's one person who has the rights, the father has the rights, and therefore it's not going to be the daughter. That's what the Gemara discussed over there regarding how do we view the father's rights. But Rashi says, wait a second, if that's the case, if it's going like Rabbi Yehuda, why is it that Maimer, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that we said he va'aviyah makabelis on the Maimer? Well, why is Maimer different than Gerushin? They're both Balkarcha, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that by Gerushin only the father can and not the daughter. So why by Maimer? If you tell me the Bryce you're resolving for a Shlakish to say that, oh, don't ask on me, it's not the Rabbanan, it's Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda holds, yeah, of course, only could do by Kedushin only the father could, because even by Gerushin holds only the father could do it. So then wait a second, but why does the Bryce then say that Maimer she could also do it? Why is Maimer any different than Kidushin or Gerushin, where we only say the father could do it? And here by Maimer suddenly we're saying that she also could do it? The Gemara is going to ask this very shortly, and the Gemara is going to answer that there's a difference, between Maimer than all the rest, because she's a kuka by medis. By Yibum, you're already almost basically married already. There's a whole sugi of Zika that we talk about. There's this bond already over there. So that the Gemara is going to address in a moment. But first, the Gemara asks, says, wait a second. Rabbi Yehuda, if the Bryce is Rabbi Yehuda, and that's why it's not difficult in Rish Lakish according to Rabbi Yechanan, Masha'en came be Kidushin. Why is the Bryce saying, Maimer, okay, that Beimadas Atzma Beimadas Avia, but which is not the case by Kidushin. Why would you say that? Masha'en came be Gerushin mi boile. The word should have been in contrast to Gerushin because that's a bigger chiddush. Even by Gerushin, which that you could do Balkarcha. That's something that we would think to say. If we do Balkarcha, we already said Svaris before, that for sure she should be able to accept it because who cares? The father's consent, there's no consent anyway. So why shouldn't she be able to? Even over there he disagrees and he says, no, you can't have two people having rights. Only the father. So why would you say Mashegi B'Kedushin? Say the bigger chiddush, but like Yehuda, say Mashegi B'Gerushin. Says you're right. Really, we should have said Mashegi B'Gerushin. It's only I did the ton of Maimer. Still, it's only because we were talking about Maimer, the Dam and the Kidushin, which is similar to when you're contrasting the both types of Kidushin, because just to say that Kidushin of Maimer is different than the Kidushin of regular Kidushin. But you're right, we could have said a bigger Kiddush since the times of Yehuda, I say Masha'egim Begerushin. But then the Gemara says, the question that Rashi had mentioned before, for Yehuda, Maishna Maimer. I don't even understand how you read the Brisa. Since he disagrees by Gerushin, he holds that by Gerushin, even though it's something that could be done forcibly, and still we say we don't care, it has to be only the father. So why by Maimer would he agree that the girl herself could receive the Maimer? I thought where does the girl come in over here? He doesn't hold you can do not by Kidushin, not by Gerushin, the daughter. So where by Maimer is even by Medas Atzma? The Gemara answers, says yes, since she has this bond and she's standing ready to be married to this Yavim, they're already like partially married already. So therefore, it's going to take effect, the Yibum with the Maimer, even with something very minute, even if she's receiving it. So even though generally you say she has no Yad over here, she has no right, but Yibum was going to be different. The Maimer will take effect because they're already Zakuk of Amedis. Says the Gemara, Hashdas Lahachi. Now that you came to such a pshat that you want to make it dependent to explain that by Maimer, the reason why she could receive it is because the Kuk of Amedis, and you said this whole shtickle Torah and they say why it's Rabbi Yehuda and why it's not difficult on Rish Lakish according to how he holds in the Rabbanan, because it's like Rabbi Yehuda, and then we have to explain what according to Rabbi Yehuda, how do we understand Maimer? So you have the shtickle because it's the Kuk of Amedis? So then Rabbi Yechanan, Nami loy tik shalach me'kara. So then, Rabbi Yechanan also you can't ask on from the beginning. Meaning, according to the first explanation that we gave for Rabbi Yechanan, according to the opinion of the Rabbanan, we had mentioned that Gerushin is different than Kedushin. What did we say the difference was? We said, by Gerushin, where she's coming back to her father, so that we said, even she could go ahead and receive it. By Kidushin, which is removing herself, only the father. We had asked on that pshat, and we fell off from that pshat. We said, this is not a good pshat. Why not? We said, what do you do with Maimer? Maimer is removing her from her father's domain, and still we say that also she could do it. So we came up with a new pshat. You're right, we fell off. We came up with this pshat of do you need das or not? Or is there something that can be done by karcha or not? And that comes back to the Gemara says, no, we can revive the first pshat. Based on what we just said, that it's not going to be difficult because you can answer the same shtickle. You could say, no, Shani Maimer is different. Why? So although you're right, usually when you're moving a girl from her father, it can only be him and not her. Yeah, but by Yibam, you're basically there already. We only need a little trop, and therefore it's enough that for herself to accept the Maimer to make it happen, and therefore we could even revive the first shot we wanted to say Rabbi Yechanan as another difference between Gerushin and the Kedushin to explain why Rabbi Yechanan holds in Rabbanan that only by Gerushin do they hold it's Afi, by Kedushin not, even though by Maimer they hold that it would be yes. Now the Gemara asks, this is why this whole conversation, this long, detailed machlekes comes in because it relates back to halacha of our Mishnah. The Gemara asks on Rish Lakish from Tanad from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, "Hoish mikadesh as bitoy kishi naira." A man could get his daughter engaged when she's a naira, by ubishlochoi. Whether him or the father's agent, he can hire an agent to say, "Hey, get my daughter engaged to that guy. I really like that guy. do me a favor, take this ring, fly out there. I want you to get her engaged. Now, the inference is, Bayu b'shluchayin. Him and his agent, yes. Ba b'shluchalai. But the girl and her agent, that not. It's only saying the father could get her engaged. It doesn't say about her. Obviously, a girl, a naira, a 12 and 12 and a half year old girl that has a father cannot get herself engaged. And the Gemara assumes this is going like everyone. So Tiv to Rish Lakish, their future Rish Lakish. Because according to Rish Lakish, he held that it's not true. Just like did Rabbanan hold regarding Gerushin that she could accept it, so to Kidushin. And here you see clearly that from our Mishnah that only the father can be Mekadosh her and not herself. Rish Lakish would say, Hanami, it's not difficult. This Mishnah, just like he explained for the previous Brisa, this Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Yes, Rabbi Yehuda holds that by Gerushin, even, it's only the father, not her. So to Kidushin. But to Rabbanan, no, they hold that just like by Gerushin, so to Kidushin, that she could do it. Says the Gemara, really? What? Right. Yeah, but the Gemara is assuming it says only ha'av makadosh is piti kishinara by b'shluch. It's not chiddush of a Mishnah. It's not only b'shluchay. It's also the word of boys. At least it should have said, but hanaira only her and not her shliach or whatever. But it doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything about her. It sounds like she can't do anything. Yeah, she should be able to make a shliach, right? So I'm saying if she was able to, then mention her. Well, we're going to see regarding Ketana, right? Yeah, so it's just sounding like she cannot do the Kidushin at all. So the Gemara says, could you really explain our Mishnah like Yehuda? But Ketani Sefer, we learned in the Sefer of our Mishnah, oftentimes the Sefer doesn't mean, it means our next Mishnah, which is on Daf Vav Med Aleph. It's like the Sefer of the Mishnah, something they got split up to put the Gemaras on it. But the Sefer says like this. If someone says to a woman, get engaged to me with this date. Get engaged to me with this one. So there's two dates over here. So if there is in any one of these dates a shava pruta, she's going to be engaged. If not, we don't combine the two dates to be worth a shava pruta, because since by each one he said hiskachi, be engaged to me, each one is its own independent kedushin. That's the Mishnah we'll see later on the Mevam Merav. Now, Vermina, we said, Man Tana, who's the Tana of our Mishnah that holds hiskachi, that you need to say the word hiskachi 2 times. And if you didn't say the word hiskachi on each one, you just said hiskachi, be engaged to me with this date and this one and this one, then they would combine to be a pruta. But my Rabbi said, you know who it is? Reb Shimon, not Rabbi Yehuda. It's Reb Shimon. Because the Amar, he says, in a different context, in a different halacha, regarding 5 people who are making a claim on a person. And they're telling him, give us what we deposited by you. And this guy says, I swear, I don't have by me, not loy lecha, but loy lecha, but loy lecha. He's only going to be chayiv for 1 shvua, until he says the word oath. Shvua she'en lecha, shvua she'en lecha, shvua. You have to say the words by each and every one of them. You see that it's Reb Shimon who holds this concept of hiskachi. It's a little bit hard to put it together, but it's the same idea of mentioning hiskachi, bezu, hiskachi, bezu. You have to mention the concept by each time you say bezu. That's the same idea by shvu. You have to say the word shvu by each and every one. Who's the one that holds that you have to mention by each one to be considered independent? Is Reb Shimon, not Rabbi Yehuda. So I can say the time of Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, what's the grace of the gefährlich? You're going to say maybe cool Rabbi Yehuda, maybe it's all Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah, like we're trying to answer. Regarding the law of specification, that to make each one independent, that he holds like Rabbi Shimon. It's not considered a specification until you say by each and every one the word shvua, and the same thing is by hiskachi. So hard to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, but he holds like Rabbi Shimon in this halacha. Says no. Does it really hold like him? But by the time when the Brisa says Zaklal, this is the rule. Kolal, if someone went and said a general terminology, a shvua, Ein chayiv ala acha is only reliable for 1 shvua. Padat, if he specified shvua, chayiv kol achas v'achas, the Remeir is chayiv each and every one independently is the words of Remeir. And the Gemara in Shavuos explains what does Remeir mean when he says the word klal, what does he mean when he says the word prat. But our main thing is the next Hana. Bihudai, he says shvua. If someone says I'm taking an oath, that you don't have by me, loy lecha, loy lecha, loy lecha, not for you, not for you, not for you. Chayiv is going to be liable for Hasham Gzelas, for the carbon asham of stealing, when he swears falsely, I'll call achas va'achas, on every single one of them. Now Rashi points out specifically without a vav, so it's loy lecha, loy lecha, loy lecha. But if he said viloy lecha, that actually would be considered as a klal, as a general, and then he wouldn't be chayiv in each one individually. Okay, but al kapanim we see one thing the way Rabbi Yehuda is, because he's not going to be like Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi he says, if let's say he says loy lecha viloy shavua, so like Rashi points out, you need the word shavua at the end. Then chayiv kol achas va'achas, you can be chayiv in each one individually. But if he mentioned shvua in the beginning, we're not going to put it on all these loy lecha. It's going to be a klal. You're only going to be chayiv on one. Okay. And then we have another opinion, and this is the main point we want to contrast. Rabbi Yehuda is not Rabbi Shimon. Shimon says, "La'olam in the chayiv." No, you're not going to be liable for independent. Until you say the word shvua by each in every one, you're not going to be chayiv an independent for a carbon for each one. So one thing we see is that Rabbi Yehuda is a different Tana than Rabbi Shimon. He holds you could be chayiv without saying the word shvua in each and every one. So we're back to the difficulty. Our Mishnah in our Sefer on the Daf Memvav, two dafim from now, we're going to see that our Mishnah holds like Rabbi Shimon, that you're going to have considered independent Kidushin, that they won't not combine only because he's skachi. Well, that's like Rabbi Shimon who holds shvua. Well, you can't say the time of Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda to resolve it for Resh Lakish to say, don't ask on me, why? In our Mishnah we say that only the father could accept the Kidushin, ha'av, mekadesh bitoy, who b'shluchay, but not the naira, because going like Rabbi Yehuda can't be Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold the skachi, and the Sefer Mishnah says the skachi. Says the Gemara, okay, I can answer the question the other way around. Elakula, rather, the whole Mishnah, as we see from the Sefer of skachi, is Reb Shimoni, ubeshlichas in our Mishnah regarding shlichas, Savla Rabbi Yehuda, he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that hold only the father could do it and not her. But you could say that according to Rabbanan, the truth is, yes, like Resh Lakish holds, that even her, meaning herself, could receive the Kidushin and not only the father, and if it would not be difficult on Resh Lakish. Like Mar brings a story, Rabasi lo ela Midrasha. He didn't go to the Beis HaMedrash. He encountered Reb Zera. Amalei said to him, my Amma idna Beis Midrasha. What was said today in the Beis HaMedrash? Amalei said to him, truth is, Afanola Ayla. I also didn't go to the drasha today. Reb Oven, he went, the Amar, and he said to me after he left that Chavrusa Kula, the entire group of those who were learning in the Beis Medrash, they made a count and they came out to Rabbi Yechanan, that by Kidushin the Chacham agreed to Rabbi Yehuda and hold that it's only going to be the father and not her, which is this machlokes that we're discussing from the previous daf. But Tzavach Resh Lakish kikruchya, Resh Lakish was screaming like a crane. What? How could you say this? You know that guy in the Beis Medrash, he's screaming on top of his lungs, V'yatzava Isa! As we were screaming, V'yatzava Isa! What do you mean? Havai is like Yitzia. Getting married, is the pasuk compares to divorce. Just like Gerushin, the Rabbanan say clearly in the Mishnah Masechus Gittin that whether her or her father, so to Kedushin, it's whether her or her father. But look at the Ashkenaz, but no one paid attention to him. You know, he's screaming, and then that was he's screaming. Yeah. He was screaming that they didn't pay attention to him. So Amalei. So basically the Gemara is coming out that we passing like Rabbi Yechanan. So Rabasi said to Reb Zera, Reb Oven Bar Samchu, is Reb Oven reliable? In other words, he's asking. He says, do you know Reb Oven very well? You can rely on his words, that he's precise in what he says over, that he doesn't forget what he's saying. Amalei says, and yes, kimin yama latignahu. So the way Rashi says it is that there was no time for him to forget in between. The moment he left out of Beis Medrash, he told me right away, like when you take a fish out of the sea and you had the hot frying pan on the boat already, putting it in the oil to fry it right away, there was no time for him to forget. That's a Rashi brings. It brings from Rabbeinu Chananel that's actually two different places, Yama and Tigni. And a person would never lie if he's in one place because it's so close to the other places, is they're going to chop me right away, so he wouldn't lie. Be that as it may, he's like, yeah, well, even if he wasn't about something, there's no way that he got it wrong, that this is the story that actually happened. And Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Ano, me, lo Reb Oven b'Reb Chia, lo Reb Oven bar Kahana, meaning this teaching of Reb Oven says, I don't remember which oven it is. Rabbavan Stam. I just know it's Rabbavan. I don't know which Rabbavan. Says, well, who cares which Rabbavan it is? It's Lamirma Didei. Meaning it's important to know if you ever hear another teacher Rabbavan that says not like that, was how could Rabbavan say this? Rabbavan's like the it's a different Rabbavan. And Taisa actually many times does that. He says, well, it's a different Rav Kahana, it's a different, it's like it's not necessarily the same one. So therefore that's why it's important. But Al Kapanim, the Gemara seems to be paskening like Rabbi Yechanan, that for Kidushin, they would disagree with what they say by Gerushin, and they would only be able to be the father and not the girl.
Based on the story
from above, and yeah, that Rosh Hashanah was screaming and no one was paying attention to him, and they all said like Rabbi Yechanan that that Kidushin is different. Perhaps, but the Rabbanan Paskin not like that. At least that base medrash. Now the Gemara continues on this opinion of the Rabbanan. Rav has the following question from Rav Nachman. As the Gemara continues on the base, Naira, according to Rabbanan, that they say that, as we learned in the Mishnah Masechet Gittin, that she could accept her own get. It's just by Kidushin they hold not, like according to Rabbi Yechanan. Okay, but the question we have now is like this: could she make a shliach to receive her get when her father is alive? Which this might be related to the question you were asking about that, but maybe only the father could be makadesh as bitay kishinara hu b'shluchai. The Gemara is asking that, well, could the naira herself, although she could receive the get, could she also make a shlich to receive a get miyad bala from her husband when, in other words, when the Rabbanan say that she herself can receive it, what do they hold? What's the question? Kiyada via dami, do we say she has the same thing like her father's hand? Like a chatzra via dami, or maybe she's like the father's courtyard, which is always two ways that we consider an extension of a person. Like shliach mitam yad or shliach mitam chatzra. We always have that question, right? Do we see it as the hand of the person? We see it as the courtyard. The question is she like the father's hand? Meaning it seems that the Gemara is assuming that everyone understands that when the girl's a naira, the father really has the rights in her. So Yehuda holds taka, therefore only the father can do it, not the girl. No, the Rabbanan hold the girl could also do it, but what are we considering her? Like the father's hand or like the father's courtyard? As the Gemara explains, what's that question? Kiyada via dami, do we say like she's like the father's hand? Ma via mashab shlich, and just like the father could make a shlich. Afhi na mashab shlich, her father's right hand girl, she could also go ahead and make a shlich. No, maybe she's like the father's courtyard. A courtyard cannot make a shlich. You're basically a vessel to receive as an extension of the father, and therefore she would not be able to get divorced until it comes to her hand. Which one is it? So the Gemara says, did Rava really have a doubt regarding this, that you could consider an intelligent person, this girl who's a 12-year-old girl, that she should have a halachic status of a chatzar when she's awake, meaning when she gets to get, that she's functioning as purely as a chatzar? How's that possible? But V'amar Rava says that kosav get. If the husband writes a get, the nasana biyat avda, and he puts in the hands of his wife's slave, if he's yashan, if he's sleeping, u'mishamarta, and she's guarding over him, then there is a get. Oh, then it's going to be a get, because that's what's called a chatza hamishtameres l'daita al yada. It's her servant is owned by her, so it's a courtyard that's being protected according to our consciousness because he's sleeping based on her. But the inference is neir ain't a get, meaning, but if he's awake, then it's not going to get. So says the Gemara, well, neir may ain't a get. Why when he's awake is not going to be a get? Because then there's a court that's being protected, not with her own intelligence, rather it's with the intelligence of the slave himself. And therefore that's not like a regular chatzar, which when we include chatzar, because in general chatzar is protected through the owner, which is the owner fences it in and opens and closes it. Now the question is, if you would think to say that the girl is like her father's courtyard, then even when the get comes to her actually hands, she shouldn't be divorced. Because if she's working in the father's chatzar, when she's awake, which is when she's going to receive the get, well then it shouldn't work, because the chatzar only works when you're sleeping and then the father's protecting and looking over. So obviously she's not like a chatzar. So what was the question? Obviously we know she's going to function as yad. So the Gemara says, you're right. We obviously knew that the girl, the naira, according to the Rabbanan, is functioning as the father's hand. But the question still was, is she as strong literally as the father's own hand to make a shlich? No, she's like the father's hand, but the hand itself cannot say, oh, okay, I'm a hand. I am going to go start functioning and telling people what to do. So Saneri responds, he says, Ein oiser shliach. No, the girl herself cannot make a shliach, even though she received the get as a naira, she actually cannot make a shliach.
Why is the odds of the Ebed not on it? His wife.
The Eved only functions as a chutzner to have his mistress get divorced from her husband because he has no rights to go and.
There's no shlichus within heaven to be makabel or to be kind.
Right, no, so he's a guy. He's if there's Eved Kanani. Right, but even that, yeah, I'll upon him. But when he does function like that, right? So he's not a shliach. He's just putting it into his hand. Then he's functioning like a chatzah. Now, Esva, the Gemara asks Mishnah Masechet is Gittin. We just said that she cannot make a shliach, but the Mishnah says like this: Ketana she'amre eskabel giti. If a girl says, "Okay, I want you to go ahead and accept my get from my husband," a girl, let's say who's 10, the halacha is so in a get achagi get liyad. There's not going to be a get until it comes to our hand because there's no shlichus for a cotton, and therefore whoever brings it to her will be the shlich of the husband to bring it like a shlich le'lacha to give it to her. Now the inference is her naira, but if she's a naira, how is a get? It's going to be a get, meaning when the shlich gets it, because it's only by katana. So you see that a naira could make a get. So you know we're talking about yeah, when she has no father, she's an adult. We'll only say when she has a father, then the father has the rights, and therefore then she cannot make a shliach because she's just like a yad. When the father's dead, she's like a regular person. So wait a second, you can't say that because on Miktani Sefer, look at the Sefer of that Mishnah. Mishnah says, if her father says, the father of this 10-year-old girl says to a person, Teva kibel get labiti, that her husband wants to divorce her, go and get this get for my daughter. Allah is so if the husband subsequently wants to back out after he gave it to the father shliach for his daughter, he's not allowed to back out because it was already shlich kabbalah. The moment the get gets to the hand of the shliach, she's already divorced. So even if it got burnt right away, she would be divorced. Now, obviously we're talking about in the ratio where there is a father. And we're saying, it depends if the father did it or the girl did it. But obviously we see that even though the naira is a girl that has a father, we see that it helps to make a shliach because only when she's ketana that it doesn't help. So you see that a naira could make a shliach, the kabel gita, miyad baile, even when she has a father. No, it's not true. There's words missing in the Mishnah themselves. This I have to read it. When the minor girl says, receive my get, that we said, in a get, I should get liyad. It's not going to be a get until the get comes to her hand. You're right. The diak is, hanaira hareza get. When she's married, it's going to be a get. On that qualifies, these are words are missing in the Mishnah. But Medrum, when we say that by Ketana, there's no shlichus by her at all, that's kishe'ain, meaning for the halacha of a naira, is kishe'ain lo av, when she doesn't have a father. Yesh lo av, but she has a father, then actually there is, this is going on the halacha of the Ketana. When did we say the Ketana will not have any shlichus? That's by her herself when there's no father. But when she has a father, then there is shlichus based on her father, and that's actually even when she's a naira. Because if Amar Avir, if her father says, whether it's a katana or whether it's a naira, Tseva kibel libiti gita, go and get this get for my daughter, and the husband wants to back out, lo yachzi cannot back out. Now, the way Rashi explains, now there's no more question of the dika, the reisha, because actually the reisha was talking when there is no father. When did we say a katana could not have any shlichus? When it's only going to be divorced when it comes to her, literally to her hands. That's when he has no father. You could have a katana that could be divorced before it gets to her hand when there's a father. The father then says, then when the shlich gets it, she will be divorced. Oh, and yeah, that's also by a naira. But when she has no father, that's when the naira. So we don't see that a naira can make a shliach. The naira can make a shliach only when there would be no father, which is what the Sefer is talking about. Now, considering this halacha, this machlekes of the Kidushin of a naira without her father. So that was we spoke about a naira. Now the Gemara talks about itma katana sheniskat sheshloil dasavia. You have a minor, a 9-year-old girl who gets engaged without her father's awareness. Now her father didn't tell her to receive the kedushin and didn't know anything about it at all. So like Rashi explains, like katana, everyone agrees her kedushin is not a kedushin without the father's consent. She has no das, she has no rights in herself. So, but what's the halacha? So we have machlekes actually. Amar Shmuel says tzricha get v'tzricha mian. She needs get and min, as the Gemara is going to shortly explain the reason why you would need both when they both seem to be contradictory. The Karan that says Dvar Begoy or Begav, however you read it, that he says there's something here inside over here. In other words, there's some type of response and wonder in the words of Shmuel doesn't make sense. Because what's the problem with this teaching? Im get, if there's a get, meaning that you're saying that she biblically is going to be engaged and therefore you need to have a get. Lamamin. Why we need a min? Min is only when the girl does it as a minor and it's not real. Kedushin is like rabbinic kedushin, and in mian, if you say that you require mian because only rabbinic, let me get. Why do you require a get? That means she was never really engaged. So Amalei, they said to him, the people of the Beis Medrash said to Karna, you have a difficulty with his teaching. You have Mar Ukva and his court in Kafri. In other words, the name of a place that's near to us. In other words, if Nardo, which is where Shmuel lives, very far, so okay, let's ask Mar Ukva. Well, he was Ava Bezin in days of Shmuel, as the Gemara says, the couldn't have Tezaim base. He'll have an answer. So at least we have a Rabbunim close by. You could ask. So what they did was they chap like this. They did afchu. They inverted. They said in the name of Karna, the teaching of Shmuel, that you need to get a mean. And name of Shmuel, they said, no, there's something over here. It's not right. And Shadrula Kamei the Rav and stand in front of Rav to know if he's going to agree to quote unquote the words of Shmuel, who if he'll disagree with what he says. The reason why, says Rashi, is because Rav was a friend of Shmuel, and they specifically flipped it to see that maybe he'll agree to the words of Karna, because they were saying Karna's taina in the name of Shmuel. They wanted to see, this Rebbe says like this. Okay, let's just see. Let's see. We'll write whatever. Say, let's see. Are you going to say the same thing? So Amalahu. So Rav didn't fall for it, not because he was going to do for Shmuel either way, but he taka held like Shmuel. It says like him by God. No, it needs get. It needs miyun. And heaven protect for the children of Abba Abba, meaning the father of Shmuel was Abba Abba. Chasrum that the name Hochei could say such a thing, and he taka didn't. They just flipped Karna's teaching with Shmuel. So it says, what's the reason? Why would you need both? Like Karna had asked. So Amar Rav Daviki says, I'll tell you why you need both. You need to have a get Shem Nisratza B'Kedushin. Maybe the father was okay with the Kedushin. If he's okay with it, turns out that it is a Kedushin. At the same time, you need Miyan. Why? Why would you need Miyan? Then nothing happened. No. Shemaloi Nisratza B'Kedushin. Maybe the father was not okay with the Kedushin. But people are going to say, whoever sees that we required this girl to get a get is going to think that the father was okay with the Kedushin. Now, we're only having it because maybe he was. But everyone's going to think, she's a full-fledged Gerusha. We saw her get. And then what's going to happen is we're going to think that in Kidushin Teivsim B'Achaisa. What happens is, an Achais Gerusha, to marry the sister of a woman that you divorce, is Karas. As the Pasuk says, B'chayeha, Kosha B'chayeha. Now, if he's going to get engaged to her sister, what's going to happen is people are going to say, you can't be married to her, and they're going to take her out without a get. That's problematic, because maybe there was no Kedushin, and now with the sister there is a Kedushin. But when you do Miyun, that proves that maybe there's no real get over here. Because if there was a real get, what are you doing Miyun for? So the Miyun is to show you, like, we don't really know what's going on over here. So therefore, if he ever gets engaged to the sister, we'll do a get there too. That's the point of having the Miyun. However, Amar Rab Nachman, he says that this that we said you require a get is specifically v'husha shidchu. Only if there was some shidduchim going on over here with the father before Kedushin, where they were dating already, and the father's like, I'm okay with this, the shidduch over here. Then you could be mesupik that maybe he was okay when he heard about it, and then it's going to be Kedushin L'Mafreya. But if there's no shidduchim going on over here, there's nothing going on, we have no reason to concern, and then we wouldn't require a get. However, Ula Amay says, no, afila miyan in the tzrich, he holds that you don't even have to do miyan. In other words, what this 10-year-old girl did in her father's lifetime is nothing, and forget about it. No get, no miyan, you don't have to do anything. Says Gemara, really? Afagav the shidchu? Ula said that even miyan is not required, that even if there was like the father said, I'm okay with the shidduch? Says the Gemara, no. Man de masni ha, the one that learned that Ula is disagreeing with Shmuel, loy masni ha did not qualify Shmuel's teaching with Rav Nachman's qualification to say that Shmuel was talking about Behusha Shidchu. Because you're right, if there was Shidduchim, most definitely Ula would agree that there would be reason to be concerned with the Kidushin. Without Shidduchim, we don't have, the 9-year-old girl did something crazy in the mall, I don't have to be concerned for that. However, those say a different version. That Amar Ula's teaching was independent. He wasn't going on Ram and Shmuel. He just said his teaching unrelated, and therefore you're right. According to this Ikad Army, the way Rashi says it, there's no difference between shitchu and lo shitchu. He said, a little girl does something to get engaged without her father's intent. No, you don't need it even mean, and that would be even if there was shidduchim. What she does has no relevance at all. However, Masr Rav Kahana asked for a Mishnah Mesechtes Yevamis. Mishnah says, B'kulon, and this is going on all those 15 arayas that the Mishnah teaches in the beginning of Mesechtes Yevamis, that they exempt that tzachas and the tzachas say, and the co-wives and the co-wives are the co-wives from Chalitz and Yibam, and the Gemara learns that from a pasuk, that the erva that falls for Yibam in front of a relative, that there's a punishment of karas, is exempt, and exempt all other co-wives too from Yibam. So now the Mishnah says over there that all the arayas, in Mesu, if they died before the husband died, if they did like a refusal, which is to walk away from the marriage and the husband, or they divorced, it would turn out to be an islandness. So when the husband dies and the co-wives fall in front of Yibam, there are no more tzaras ever that time, and therefore the ever is not exempting her co-wives. So then the halacha is tzachasin mutachas. Then the co-wives are permitted to do Yibam. Now, one of the cases over there is Bitoy, is his daughter, in one of those 15. That the Mishnah is telling us that if the daughter did miyun in the lifetime of her father's brother, which was her husband, because she was married to her uncle, and then the husband, which is this guy's brother, dies after miyun, after his daughter did miyun, then what the Mishnah is saying, the Kohabs are permitted to her father. So obviously we see that you could have a daughter doing miyun in her father's lifetime. On that the question is, how's that possible? The Kid Shaman, who exactly got her engaged to her father's brother? If you think her father married her off to his brother, that doesn't make sense. But miyun sagalo, you think it's going to be enough with miyun? What do you mean? Miyun is only when there's rabbinic kedushin. The father gives biblical rights to the father to get his daughter engaged. Get ma'alyaba, you would have to have a bona fide get. Elav, obviously it's the kachi nafsha. Ooh, obviously she got herself engaged without her father's consent. And Vagatani, we learn the boyamin. You see that you require at least miyun. That's not like Ula who says you don't need no miyun. Says the Gemara, no. Who ma'isab la, who mavarkla. Rav Kana asked the question, he gave the answer. It's not true. It's not difficult on Ula. It's It's what's called a girl could be considered an orphan when her father's still alive. What does that mean? Her father married her off to someone else. She got widowed or divorced when she was still a 8-year-old girl. Where now when she's 10 years old, she's like an orphan because since the moment her father marries her off, her father has no more rights anymore on her. Then she goes and gets herself engaged to her uncle. That Kidushin requires miyun because we don't have to wait for her father's consent. Now it's enough with miyun because what a little girl does is only rabbinically valid. Because the Rabban instituted that a girl that doesn't have a father, that's a minor, we don't want people to just treat her only, so we let her get married. That's only rabbinically. Therefore, it's not difficult on Ula. Now, Masr Rabnun asks another question on Ula from the following brisa. We say you cannot sell a daughter l'kreivim to relatives as a shivcha because there's no kedushin with that relative with his daughter, and the problem is you need to be able to do yud, which is to marry the shivcha. They said no, you could sell it to relatives. As the Gemara learned in the first paragraph of your Testament base, sometimes the daughter is only going to be sold for amahos, for slavery, and not for yud. But as continued to Memheim Aleph, they agree that he could sell her as a widow to a kohen gadol or grusha v'chlutz a kohen hedyot, because there is kedushin, even though there's an aveira, but kedushin would take effect. So therefore, it does qualify for the halach of yid. Now the question: Hayamana hechadami? What's this father selling his daughter, the widow, to a kohen gadol? What does that mean? If you think the father had married her off to this man that she was widowed from before, he's now selling her as a slave woman to the kohen gadol. What do you think? He could sell her now as an amma, as a maidservant? We went through this whole sugya in the first parak. We said you cannot sell your daughter as a maidservant after you already married her off. So how would he even marry his daughter as almana to kohen gadol in the first place? Must be talking about that. She became an almana from the first one that she was married to when she married herself off. We were calling her almana. Obviously, that there was a kedushin, so therefore al kapam should need at least me. And obviously, it's not like ula. Here we're talking about when she was widowed the first time, she was never married off. What does it mean? But she's not almana. From her father had sold her as a slave woman, and then the master went and did yud with her. Then the question is, wait a second, but that came through the father anyway. That's like selling her for ishus, and now you cannot sell her as shivchas. Says the Gemara, no, that brisa is valib Rabbi Yehuda. The one that he says, Mois Rishon is the first monies that you receive on the sale, is love the Kidushin, and that's not given for quote unquote Kidushin, that's for Shivchas. The yud that takes effect is because in the Shivcha there's still some prutas left over here that she owes him, and that the master comes and says, I'm going to use those prutas as Kidushin. But that's not through the father to make that second sale a Shivchas Achaishas. That's going to be considered a Shivchas Achashivchas, which is allowed to do, and therefore that's not difficult. Ula could be when the girl does anything herself, then actually that it would not be that you would require anything, not get, not miyun, and therefore it's not difficult. Ula, thank you to any time. Hosting us, I can